Hi boys and girls, this is Miss Gabby, and to celebrate the recent holiday Halloween, we're going to be reading the story called Treats and a Trick by Anita Amin. And in this video, we're going to be testing our comprehension skills as we read and figure out what is going on in this story. And something interesting, we actually read a story about this author in one of my early videos about fancy bread. Now, I wonder what this author is bringing to the table today. Well, before we start, if we look at some of the context clues, and in this picture that they give us here, it looks like we have a girl dressed in a superhero costume and then a boy dressed in a dog costume. But he doesn't look very happy, and she looks kind of concerned. And with that, I think it's safe to assume that there is a problem going on in this story that possibly this girl here is trying to fix. But as we read this story today, I would like you guys to think about a time where you had an Halloween or any kind of holiday where it just didn't work your way. Maybe you just had a costume you didn't like anymore, or you didn't get enough candy than you expected. Because I feel like if we think that way, we could probably relate to our characters Leah and Andy in this story. But with that, follow along with me as we read aloud. It was Halloween night. Leah pulled on her superhero costume, she lit up her glow stick, she grabbed the biggest bag. "Let's go trick-or-treating," she said. But her brother Andy was not ready. "I do not like my costume," Andy crossed his arms. He would not wear his puppy costume. "What if we switched?" Leah asked. Andy smiled. They switched costumes. "Now can we go?" Leah asked. But still, Andy was not ready. He shook and snapped his glow stick. "My glow stick will not light up," he said. "What if we switched?" Leah asked. Andy smiled. They switched glow sticks. "Now can we go?" Leah asked. But still, Andy was not ready. "My bag is so small," he said. "Yours is bigger. It's not fair." "What if we switch?" Leah sighed. Andy smiled. They switched bags. "Now can we go?" Leah asked. Yes, Andy was ready. They went door to door ringing doorbells. "Trick or treat," they said, their bags filled with treats. They hurried home. They dumped out their treats. Leah frowned at her treats. Sour candies, licorice, caramels. These were Andy's favorites, not hers. She looked over at Andy's treats. Chocolates, pencils, tattoos. "But those are my favorites," Leah said. "Can we switch, please?" "You trick-or-treated for me, and I trick-or-treated for you. That is a funny trick," Andy smiled. They switched treats, and Leah smiled too. Well, with that, boys and girls, how would you describe Leah as she acted towards her brother? Would you say she's very unkind, mean, or very nice and caring? Well, I would say she's very caring, because throughout this story, we see her giving and switching her candy and her costume, the glow sticks with her brother, just to make him happy as they go trick-or-treating. And with that, let's look at this question we have here. Have you ever heard a sequence of steps? Well, a sequence is steps that you take to get to a goal. So in this case, Leah and Andy took certain steps to get outside and go trick-or-treating. You might find yourself doing this when you get up in the morning. Well, what happens when you get up? First, you get out of bed, you make your bed, then you go and brush your teeth, and then you get dressed and get ready for the day. So what we're going to be looking at here is the sequence that Leah and Andy took to go outside and get some treats. And for this part of the video, I would suggest getting out a piece of paper and follow along with me as we figure it out. So when I mean sequence of steps, we're going to put a 1 next to the first step, 2 for the second, 3 for the third, and 4th for the last step. And to help us answer this, let's read aloud our selections here. So 1, Leah and Andy switch glow sticks. 2, Leah and Andy switch treats. 3, Leah and Andy switch costumes. And 4, Leah and Andy switch bags. And sometimes when you're presented these types of problems, an easy way to help you figure out how to sort them is figure out what was the last step. Well, did they switch treats, costumes, glow sticks, or bags? Well, before they headed outside, Andy was upset because he thought his bag was too small than compared to Leah and said that that wasn't fair. And then once they went outside, they went trick-or-treating and got a bunch of treats. And then at the ending part of the story, Leah was upset because she didn't get any of the candy that she liked. So that's when they made their final switch, which was Leah and Andy switched treats. And if you're writing the question down, make sure you put the 4 right next to our selection. But what did I just say before that came before they switched treats? They switched bags. So that was the 3rd step to our sequence here. And then let's look at what might have been the first step. We're left with that they switched costumes or they switched glow sticks. And with these types of problems, it sometimes is easier to go back into the story and look at what came first. So, where did the first switch come? Well, what if we switched? And if we look previously, that passage said that he was upset because he didn't like his costume. So that means that first sequence of switching was when they switched their costumes they were wearing. And so with that, we could put a 1 in the costumes being switched. And then that just leaves us with the glow sticks being switched, which would be our second step. And just to check our answer, let's read them aloud and see if it makes sense. So first, they switched costumes. Then they switched glow sticks. Then they switched bags. And lastly, they switched treats. And it's always safe to check your answers. So boys and girls, when you come across this question in the future when it pertains to a different story, always just reread the story and see if you got it correct. And with that, let's look at some of the words that we saw here in this story. So, I have 4 examples on the screen, and if you can, on that sheet of paper, mimic what I have here. So, what we're going to do is that we receive a little hint to all of these problems, and we are asked to find the missing letters to those words. And let's look at this first one here. So, an outfit you wear to look like someone or something else. Well, what is it that you wear on Halloween Day or go to the store to find before you go trick-or-treating? You're wearing a costume. Yes. And then let's think about how that word is spelled. Well, let's look at its first syllable. We have cost. So, how do we spell cost? K-k. That's a C. And then cost, st. That's an S. And then do you hear that T? C-O-S-T. And then yum. Yum. Well, we already have that U and that ending E, so what's in the middle there? Yum. And M for costume. And then when you break up words like this with their syllables, they become a lot easier to spell. And then let's look at this next one. Made a serious face. Well, I feel like Andy made a face throughout that whole story when he didn't get what he wanted. And what is something that you guys do when you're upset? You frown. And if you look at the word, it starts with an F, so we know it's going to be frown. So let's think about how we spell frown. So it's fr, so we have an R, and then own. We hear an ow sound. So frown will be a W. And then again, look at that hint. Made a serious face. So it's representing something that happened in the past. So what would you add to frown to make it past tense? Well, he frowned, and it gives us an E. So frowned. He frowned. All right, and let's look at this fourth one. Something sweet to eat. Well, what is another word for candy? That's a synonym. So let's think. It ends with a T, and it looks like there's an R after the first letter. So, what might you think it is? Well, they did say it quite a bit in the story, and it was the last sequence of steps, like our last question. They traded treats. And what does that start with? Ta-ta, a T, and then R-E, treats, eats. That is a long E sound, so that's going to be an A next to that E. So treat. And this last word we have is a little long, so I'm going to give you the first letter. It starts with a C. And it's a chewy, buttery, light brown candy. And it's candies, so it's going to have that ending S, meaning that we're talking about more than one. So it is C-A-A-M-E, and then S is what is given. Well, what kind of flavor is that? And it's chewy and buttery. It's going to be caramels. Yes. So care, that's an R, a mels, L's. So we have the M-E, that is an L, so it's caramels. Great job, boys and girls, for helping me solve those questions we had here today. But let's take a look back in the story, and I want you to think for a moment. Now, we saw Leah helping her brother Andy out quite a bit with trading costumes, glow sticks, bags. Now, what is something nice that Andy did for her at the end of the story? And if you said that Andy switched treats with Leah, you'd be right. At the very end, we saw a problem with Leah where she didn't like the kind of candy she got. So in return for her being nice to her brother, she pretty much got the same treatment back, and he traded candy with Leah. It just goes back to that saying, treat others how you would like to be treated. So Leah treated her brother with respect and kindness, so she got the same in return at the end of our story. But with that, I really hope you guys learned some new words, and that this Halloween you guys get a lot of candy. But I hope you have a nice day. Thank you. Bye.